Hi class, welcome to Theories of Personality. My name is Tony Haudergy and I am your professor over the course of the next 8 weeks. I wanted to welcome you to this course and just talk to you a little bit about the syllabus and then get started on what the first 3 chapters are. This course is going to be kind of fast-paced because it's over the course of 8 weeks. Some of you may be used to this, others of you this may be new. So I wanted to kind of educate you a little bit about the online process so that you better understand what it looks like and when things are due and how it works and things of that nature. Your textbook is Theories of Personality. It's the 10th edition, and you will for sure need this. Your quiz questions and answers will be in here. Well, the questions won't, but the answers will be. They're not hard to find, but they're in this textbook. So you will need it for the quizzes, as well as I will be going over the PowerPoints of the selected chapters, but that still doesn't necessarily give you all the information that looking over the text would. I understand you can't read it word for word if you're in other classes, but you should be definitely looking through the text to be able to better understand the course, because we will be going through it so quickly and I'm only going to be lecturing for a short amount of time. I myself am a licensed marriage family therapist. I have my own private practice and I'm an adjunct professor for ops as well as for main campus. I myself was a CBU student and CBU graduate, so I understand CBU quite well. And I understand too, just from teaching, that sometimes doing an online class can be difficult or hard to understand if you haven't done this before. So I wanted you to understand that day 1 of the course is Monday and day 6 of the course is 11:59 p.m. on Saturday night. So that means all papers need to be done, quizzes, discussion boards need to be done by Saturday night at 11:59 p.m. So hopefully none of you are procrastinators and you don't wait till that moment in time. There will be 4 papers, each worth 75 points, and they're expected to be in APA format. So if you are uncertain of what APA format is, you should have the APA manual. But that is the format all papers are supposed to be in. There'll be a discussion board, and what discussion boards look like is a question will be posted. You respond to the question, and then you respond to 2 other people, and you will get points for each time that you respond to somebody else. And then there's the quizzes. So there'll be 5 quizzes, 75 points each. Okay, and then lastly you have your capstone paper, which is 150 points. There's a total of 1,000 points for the course. Now in the assignment section in Blackboard, let's see, I'll kind of show you. Again, some of you may know this and this might be very redundant and I apologize. Looking at the learning activities, you'll see week 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. In week 1, for example, you'll see an overview of the course. I'll have attached in here this recording with the video, so you can watch this, and this is considered your lecture for the course. Now, in your Blackboard somewhere, you need to say that you've watched the video, and I'll be able to see through YouTube if people have actually watched the video. So please watch it. It's a way of reiterating the information, and like I said, hopefully you have the text to be reading the information, but already by the end of this first week we're going to have a paper deal. And like I said, this course is very fast-paced because it's 8 weeks, so there's no rest for the weary here. So as I'm showing you right now, okay, so this is again your learning activities, and it goes over week 1, what's due week 1 of day 7. Okay, so day 7 is Sunday. Okay, so if it says it's due day 7, that means Sunday by 11:59 p.m. I also do not accept late work. So please turn in your work on time. If there is something major going on in your life and for some reason you don't think you'll be able to turn in a paper, please let me know. But I've heard a lot of different things from students from it was Father's Day or whatever, things, it's Mother's Day, things of that nature. And I understand significant things happen like graduation and whatnot. However, like, you know what to do ahead of time, and that doesn't mean that you should wait till the last minute to do those things. So I don't like late work. I don't accept late work. So please understand that from the beginning, so you're not considering what papers you can turn in late. I'm sure none of you are like that, but I've had past experience where students are like that. So anyways, but like I said, here is the schedule for the next 8 weeks. Now I can be reached, there's where it says I don't accept late work. I can be reached via email, which is on the syllabus, or you can reach me by my phone number. I do not have office hours, so if you need to meet with me in person, you need to contact me so we can figure out if we need what we need to do. I try to respond to my email as quickly as possible, and same with my phone. So either one of those ways you could contact me, and I'd be more than happy to help you. Like I said, I know online can be an adjustment if this is your first time ever taking an online course. So we're just going to move on to chapter 1. Something that's really neat about doing this class is that you'll get to, if you're interested in psychology at all, you will get to really learn. I think it took away my face there. You'll really get to learn a lot about personality and what it looks like. And some of these theorists, which are like the grandfathers or grandmothers of psychology in general, especially these early theorists. Some of you have heard of them before, especially if you're interested in psychology or you're a psychology major, you're looking into becoming a therapist yourself. So these people and their theories are going to be informative to you, and everyone has different opinions on what they believe is correct or accurate, and that's really irrelevant. It's more or less about learning the information and being able to digest it and see like where these people were coming from. So chapter 1 is talking really about some of the basics about studying personality. And I'm going over these slides in a much faster way because there's so many of them, and there's 3 chapters this first week. So I have skipped over a lot. And again, that's why your text is important, because you need it to be able to do well on your quiz. I have gone over the quizzes myself, so I know where the quiz questions are, and I know they are in the text. So you have to be able to look at your text, and not all of them are just keywords. So you have to be able to kind of look through the chapters, be able to find the answers. So, okay, the study of personality. Everyone has one, as you all know. Personality is complex, and a lot of that is based on how we are raised, nature versus nurture. Each theory provides a piece of a grand puzzle. So each theorist takes their own perspective, and what's going to be interesting, and what I will go over for most of these theorists that we'll talk about, is their own personal history, because that has a lot to do with their thought processes on personality. So they tend to, you can see where they're shaped because of their own family dynamics. Personality, history of psychology, the study of consciousness, the study of behavior. Personality is what can be seen and observed. We'll see through different people like Freud, they measured personality based off observing their own clients, not so much on just theory. Study of unconscious personality is the whole person, both conscious and unconscious. So there's 2 different parts of the personality. And study of scientific. So personality is what can be studied using scientific methods, which different theorists believe in different scientific methods. How others see us. So the mask, the definitions of personality, how we are seen. Characteristics. So consider a situation, how they interact with others, unique characteristics, distinctive internal properties, personality, the unique, relatively enduring internal and external aspects of a person's character that influence behavior. And our personalities do influence not only what we decide and what we choose, but how we affect others. And that's what makes personality, on a total side note, personality disorder so interesting, is that it's not something that you just necessarily take a pill to correct. It's who a person is, and that's why it can be so problematic for them and for the people that they're around. So the internet and social networking, which this wouldn't have been a slide hmm, 15, 20 years ago, but now it is. So it shapes personality. It can reduce psychological well-being and decreases quality of relationships. I had a colleague who said, if it wasn't for Facebook, we wouldn't be in business, because if people had actual relationships and real friends, they wouldn't need therapists. And I laughed and chuckled, because I do believe some of that's true. I can't even count on my hand, that's how many times I have people coming in my office over issues in regarding social media. Not to mention the depth of relationships. A lot of these relationships are based upon what they read on someone's wall, not because they actually know them very deeply. And that's unfortunately very tragic. Reflects personality, more frequent and common in exaggerated, narcissistic, and neurotic ways. So, as we can tell in social networking, we can tell when someone is maybe has some maybe personality disorder symptoms, or the way that they're behaving on there reflects something kind of neurotic or problematic, and things that maybe we shouldn't be advertising on the World Wide Web. Ethnic and gender issues. Traditionally, white male theorists generally ignore gender and ethnicity. Okay, so looking at things from their perspective. And so there's cross-cultural psychology that looks at things from a broader perspective. In a couple chapters, we will be learning about Karen Horney, who was a feminist and really developed feminist psychology and looked at things from a female perspective in the era of Freud, which was something that was kind of that stood out in her time, especially if you look at her era. It's kind of revolutionary. So anyhow, that's her, and we'll be learning about her in next week. Assessment and personality studies. So evaluation of personality used for diagnosis, education, counseling, and research. And the principles are measured in reliability, so consistency, and validity, what is intended. So those are the two factors that they're looking at to see how reliable really a test is. And we'll see as we learn about some of these theories, some of their outcomes aren't necessarily very reliable, and that came out later on in time. So these are the 6 different ways of assessment. Now, I'm not going over all 6 of these on here, so you guys will have to look through that more in depthly. But there's self-report inventories, online test administration, projective tests, clinical interviews, behavioral assessments, thought and experience samples. And some of you yourselves may have done different personality tests. Just as a matter of like, you're curious about yourself, or maybe for your work or job, they've had you do different personality inventories, which are great. And I think learning about yourself more in depthly is a way to really develop and see areas of growth or areas of strength. I think they're great in a team setting. It really is, I think, helpful to understand better about yourself. Some assessments I think are more reliable than others. So cross-cultural assessment is potential problems can be if you don't understand, if they don't understand the language properly of the people that they're giving the test to, so it might create some confusion. Familiarity with answer formats, discomfort with the process. Arab countries discussing sex might be very uncomfortable. Islamic cultures portraying humans in pictures. Like different cultures are going to be set off by different ways of trying to administer tests. Personality research methods. So there's the clinical method, experimental method, virtual research method, and correlation method. Again, your text is going to go in more detail on each one of those. I am not, for the sake of having to get through 3 chapters. Theory and the study of personality. So theory framework to simplify and describe data in a meaningful way. And it's tested repeatedly against reality based on large amounts of data, and the goal of objectivity, some subjective components. So again, they retest the same people sometimes, different days. They are gathering a lot of information to really see how accurate their findings are. Okay, so this is, again, chapter 1, the basis of personality. So we're going to go now to chapter 2. So we're going to get into Freud. Freud lived from 1856 through 1939, and he lived in Vienna. He actually was around during the Nazi invasion of Vienna, and he ended up going to London. Actually, a few of his siblings died in concentration camps. So anyways, he struggled with sexuality and impotence and created theory from personal experience and memories. So Freud had some very interesting relationships. It goes more in depth in your text, but it is so clear why he was so focused on certain things, because there was some personal issues. He was a clinical neurologist, studied with, I'm sorry if I butcher some of these names, I can't pronounce them, Charcot, explored the benefits of cocaine, which later he tries to get away from, because they kind of blamed him for the cocaine epidemic in the early 1900s. They didn't realize what it was addictive and all these things at the beginning. And he really thought it was amazing. And then they realized how detrimental it was. And then he tried to backtrack on a lot of his papers and such on that topic. Developed psychoanalytic practice. So when you think of the person laying on the couch with the therapist behind him, that comes from Freud. That's, if you've seen any videos of him practicing, that's what it kind of looked like. And he developed a group of disciples. He was, like I said, the father of psychology. We don't have to agree with all the things that he found, but he really did a lot of research in psychology and got a lot of things out there for people to think about. So, and like I said, he escaped the Nazi invasion, propelling forces of personality. So these are some of his thoughts. Oh, and going back to him, we'll talk about this a little bit. He had a very interesting relationship with his mother, not a good relationship with his father. He seemed to be kind of parentified, or almost, he felt like he had more power than his father as early as the age of 2. So when we get into things like the Oedipus complex and things of that nature, he had a unique relationship with his mom. So a lot of his thought process comes from his own stuff with his own mother. So propelling forces of personality, the form of energy, life instincts, oriented towards survival, libido, and cathexis, death instincts, compulsion to destroy and conquer, and aggressive. Okay. He comes from the conscious, which is experiences and awareness, limited aspect of personality, preconscious, the storehouse of memories and thoughts, can call into the conscious and unconscious, home of the instincts, major driving powers behind all behaviors. And he kind of dealt a lot with the unconscious things that people don't remember, which can be kind of a scary place as a clinician, because we don't ever want to put thoughts or memories in someone's mind that we are not aware of. You'll hear, when you think of Freud, these are 3 things to think of: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is the pleasure principle, the primary process of thinking. The ego is the reality principle, secondary process of thinking. And the superego is the internalized values, the conscience, and the ego ideal. So these are 3 main structures of personality that are totally Freud. And you hear them a lot discussed in psychology. If you're taking a psychology course or things of that nature, you should have heard about this. So anxiety, conflicts threaten the ego, and he himself he called it a nervous breakdown or something of that nature. I believe it was in his 40s, and he said it had to do with anxiety, and then he said it had to do with his sexual relationship with his wife. But so conflicts threaten the ego. So the reality anxiety, tangible dangers, neurotic anxiety, the id versus the ego, and moral anxiety, the id versus the superego. So when these 2 sides are at battle, it creates anxiety or neurosis, as we would read in your text. And so because people can't resolve these things, that's how they start to behave. Anxiety defense mechanism. So the ego strategies to defend against anxiety. So we've heard all about defense mechanisms. We may not know where all of them are, but we've heard about them. So they're provoked in conflict, right? We see people who avoid things or deny things, or they twist it in a way so maybe they aren't at fault, as a way of kind of defending themselves against maybe whatever it is that they're hearing. We discuss this a lot in therapy. So repression, denial, reaction formation, projection. Reaction formation is actually a quiz question. And this is the example of I really want to hurt animals, but instead of doing that, I now become an activist for animals. So kind of interesting. Regression, rationalization, displacement, sublimation are different defense mechanisms. The psychosexual stages. So again, with the defense mechanisms in your text, you can read more about them, but you'll read them and you'll probably even see some of them in yourself, right? They're very, you can apply that to whether you agree with Freud or not. You can see these things in action with people, often in conflict or when there is a situation where they're being criticized. You see these walls come right up, and that's not abnormal. Okay, so psychosexual stages. Personality develops in stages. Each stage is divided by erogenous zone. Resolve conflict to move to the next stage. So again, a lot of the different theorists we're going to talk about are going to have different stages. Some of them are going to be similar because they agreed with Freud or some of Freud. Others of them are going to be very different. So fixation, the lack of resolution. Again, going back to libido, which he thought a lot of anxiety came from sexual desires. So excessive frustration of gratification, there's not resolution, so there's this fixation on the problem. He talks about different stages of life, and through these different stages, this is what's going on in development. So we have the oral stage, which is very fixated on things for the mouth, pleasure of sucking. So when we think of a baby, we have nursing, putting their fingers in their mouth. You notice little kids will put all kinds of toys in their mouth, so that's an oral fixation. So excessive concern with oral activities, oral aggressive, so excessive pessimism and aggressivism. So his thought process, if you didn't get enough of different things in these stages, it creates issues later on in life. So if you didn't have enough sucking, potentially you're going to become an aggressive person. If you did it too much, then you'll be fixated on oral things as you get older. The anal stage, this is like, again, when a lot of the potty training is going on. So you could become anal, rigid, stubborn, or cruel, destructive, and tantrums. If maybe someone's too strict or rigid during this time, these are some of his thought processes. So if potty training was a really difficult time, then a person could react in different ways based on his theory. The phallic stage, so birth to one. Genitals are primary and erogenous zone, superego development. So for boys, this is the Oedipus complex, and that comes from having fantasies about mom. And for girls, it's the Electra complex and penis envy. His thought process is that women are jealous that they don't have a penis. We'll have other theorists that have different thought processes, but this is what his thoughts were. And then the latency period is 5 to puberty, not a true state. It's a period of rest, sex instinct sublimated into school activities, hobbies, and sports, and focus on same-sex friendships. So this is when kids play with the same gender typically. And then adolescence and adulthood, the latency period is conforming to social sanctions of sexual expression, finding satisfaction in love and work, and the focus committed adult relationships. So assessment, he did free association, which is where people just talk about whatever it is that comes to mind. You've probably heard about that. Dream analysis, he was big into interpreting dreams and unconscious content. Catharsis, expressing emotion. Resistances, blocks to expression. Manifest content, actual dream events, and latent content, symbolic meaning. So looking into meaning in things that maybe a person wouldn't necessarily think based on the unconscious. So a lot of this, again, is very different than what other theorists would do with personality, but this is what he did, and this was very popular during his time when you think of psychology and people going to therapy. I always refer back to, I don't know if any of you have watched the show Mad Men, but there was a period of time where Don Draper's wife went to a psychiatrist, I believe, and it's a perfect example of what Freudian psychology or psychoanalytic therapy would have looked like. It's actually kind of funny. So his results. Catharsis does not reduce negative emotions. What did he looked into so his support is the unconscious, the ego control, resiliency, displacement, repression, denial, and projection. So those are the defense mechanisms. Mixed results for repressed memories of childhood sexual abuse. He did a lot of studies and he found that a lot of people claim to have sexual abuse in their past, yet then later they were saying it wasn't sexual. So there was a lot of conflict in if those findings were real sexual abuse that these women were talking of, or if it was their fantasies of sexual abuse. And then later they were saying the women were really sexually abused, but he just put it as a fantasy. So there was a lot of conflict. And you'll even hear now when people think of Freud, they'll think of he said a lot of people were sexually abused that weren't sexually abused. So anyways, you have to just be very as a clinician, for myself, I'm very conscious of not, if someone is uncertain of something, we do not put anything in their mind. That's up to them to figure out. So the Freudian slip, we talk about this when someone says something when really they mean something else. Dreams as a reflection of emotional concerns, aggressive instincts. So those are kind of the results and the support for his findings. Object relations theory comes from the Freudian psychoanalytic approach, and these are other clinicians that worked with him, Heinz Kohut and Melanie Klein. And criticism. Psychoanalysis is too long and costly. Again, because you're not putting, as a clinician, you're really letting them come to terms with certain things, and so it could be a long process. Too much emphasis on biology, determinism, and sex, and he was very fixated on sex and how it affects people's personality and their relationships. Granted, he had a struggle himself with sex, so I think that's why. And so these are some of the criticisms. Now, even still to this day, you'll have psychoanalytic counseling centers that are purely driven by this theory, which is fine. But this is a theory that's still in practice today, and people really do like it. So it just is depending on preference and what the clinician's preference is. So lastly, we are going to do chapter 3 today. Okay, we're going to look at Jung, Carl Jung, Jung, however you want to say it. He's someone else that you've probably heard about. He was born in 1856 through 1939, and he was in Switzerland. His father was kind, weak, and powerless, and the mother was emotionally unstable. He was thought of being as lonely and turning inward. The life of Jung, he studied medicine, psychiatry, became a disciple of Freud, and later severed relationships, so they started to disagree. He had a neurotic episode at 38 years old, and he looked into self-analysis of his unconscious. So he talked a lot about psychic energy and the libido versus the psyche. So diffuses general life energy and fuels the work of the psyche. And then the psyche is Jung's term for personality. Okay, so when you hear that word, that's what it's referring to. Psychic energy functioning. So the opposition principle, conflict between opposing processes. Equivalence principle, continuing redistribution of energy. And entropy principle, the tendency toward balance and equilibrium. So the systems of personality, we're not going to get into all this. The ego, attitude, psychosocial functions, psychological functions, psychological types, personal unconscious, complexes, collective unconscious, and archetypes. Okay, so those are the different systems of personality. You can look that up in your text. Development of personality. There's childhood, so the ego, here's some similar words. Ego development distinguishes self from others. Adolescence, conscious, dominant, focused on external reality. And middle age, shift in focus, external to internal, balance unconscious and conscious. Development, individualization, fulfillment of one's capacities to become an individual, which, I mean, who doesn't want to reach individualization? You know, it's like the utmost peak. the integration of the conscious and unconscious. So that's been done successfully. Not too many people, I would say, have reached, based on his standards, individuation.